Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Omni Athlete. You're here because, like us, you believe that sport is a vehicle for elevating global consciousness. But you know that elevating consciousness through sport only matters if it actually helps you to compete at your highest level. We created this show to empower your performance with the wisdom and techniques of the world's highest achieving mind, body, and spirit competitors. Okay, so today's guest is a licensed clinical psychologist, teacher, author of 6 books, and is a 3-time TEDx speaker. He is the founder of the School of Love and the web series Therapist in the Wild. His work has been featured through prestigious growth-focused platforms like Integral Life and the Journal of Integral Theory and Practice. He has conducted over 55,000 therapy sessions during his 40-plus year career, and through the combination of surfing, tennis, and martial arts, brings a wealth of firsthand knowledge, research, and wisdom to the role that love, healing, and intersubjective energies can have on the athletic experience. It's my pleasure to introduce to Omni Athlete, the man who is on a mission to help us all love better through the creation of transformative healing systems and the growth of our shadow selves, Dr. Keith Witt. Welcome to the show, Keith.
I am honored to be on your show, Josh.
So we were just talking a moment ago before we started rolling about the theme of our keynote presentation from this weekend's festival, and the theme was love as your competitive strategy. So I think as a perfect backdrop for our conversation, what I would love to do is ask you a very open question to start, and that is,
Sure.
What role does love play in athletic performance from where you see it?
Almost everything. One definition of love, one of my favorite ones, is to be at one with. And in my own experience as a martial artist and as an athlete, and in my working with martial artists and athletes, the superior performance always happens when they feel at one, not just with what they're doing, but with who they're doing it with. And that includes opponents.
Yeah.
In martial arts, of course, when you're at one with your opponent, then you're in charge of the moment. And the opponent is there to make you stronger, and you're there to make your opponent stronger. In this sense, this is taking one of the most core drives that we have in us as human beings, which is to find ourselves in dominance struggles with other people, and then turning it into the art of sport. And so being at one with is literally love. And you notice that a lot of the superior athletes that at least that I've admired, they compete with joy. And when you can feel it. Even the people that are pissed off when they're playing well, you can feel a deep joy happening below. And that joy is a sense of unity. It's a sense of being one with. And it doesn't happen in isolation either, because everything is relationships. Relationships with ourselves and relationships with other people. And those relationships are either more harmonious or less harmonious. And my professional life has been identifying the relationships that work for people and helping them make them stronger, and identifying the ones that don't, either the ones inside themselves or with other people. If it's a team sport, people on their team, or if it's an individual sport, with them within the context of what they do, and improving those relationships. And what that does is it helps us grow, and that's what we want.
One of the points that we found recurring through the weekend at our festival was this notion that as coaches, as leaders, maybe is a better word, not just coaches, but I think this goes for athletes too. We are often responding to our teammates, our players, the people around us from places of lack of holes that we don't yet maybe realize are there. We haven't healed ourselves, and yet we're still trying to lead the people around us, right? And this is a challenging place to be in for somebody who believes themselves to be a leader. So I think one of the questions that I'd love to hear you just reflect on is what's the first step to bringing that shadow forward when we are dealing with relationships?
I've written several books on integral psychotherapy, and David Megacy, who introduced me to you, is an integral enthusiast. Integral psychology has attracted me, and I became, one of the people who write about it and practice it, because it has the most global understanding of the human experience of any system that I've ever had. And we get down to the granular level of us individually, we're functioning all the time from basically unconscious forces coming up through us, responding to the world. I have a book called Shadow Light that I put out a couple of years ago that explores this in great detail. And those forces are either constructive or destructive forces. Now, how do they affect us in relationship, in love? Well, I have another book coming out on September 10th called Loving Completely, where we're focusing specifically on the relationships. But let's just talk about shadow for a second. That constructive stuff is what makes us effective, or what makes us work. We want to surrender to that. That's the muscle memory of how to do it right. The people that have studied excellence, Leonard Cohen, Coyle, who wrote the Talent Code, the people that have all those systems, basically are helping people train their unconscious towards excellence, and then surrendering to that. But also we have destructive stuff that comes up, and the destructive comes up when we feel threatened or when we feel unsafe. And when that comes up, we shift. And when we shift towards away from what are called growth hierarchies, where we're combining to create more excellence, into dominator hierarchies, where we're unconsciously either trying to dominate somebody or we're feeling dominated by them. Now, coaches, when they get frustrated, will shift sometimes into dominator hierarchies. Any of us that have helped people know that. And sometimes what we'll get with people that we're working with is they'll push back. And our nervous systems will feel threatened. And then when they do that, they enter these defensive states where there's distorted perspectives and amplified emotions and so on. Destructive impulses. Now, if I'm a coach, my job is to center myself out of that defensive state into a state of healthy response, and to invite the person I'm working with back into a growth hierarchy. Now, growth hierarchy is still a power hierarchy. Right now, way more about interviewing than I do, and I know more about my book than you do. Okay, so see, there's a power differential, but you and I are both seeking deeper truth. This is a growth hierarchy. So as a coach, I settle myself and invite my person back into that growth hierarchy. We are focusing on your excellence, okay? And if you're resisting your excellence, there's something going on with that. Let's go deeper into that. But I'm doing that from a position, not a position of trying to dominate, not a position of trying to coerce. I'm getting a position of inviting that invitation from the dominator hierarchy that's being invited by the distress into the growth hierarchy of we're looking for more excellence. We're looking for that growth mindset of effort and progress and development is what we're looking for. And all great coaches do this. You see a particular kind of beginning. The days of the Billy Knights are over, okay? And to this day, I've always wondered about that. I wondered if particularly with his top athletes, did he have a different kind of relationship with them than he did publicly? And I'll never know. I'm not familiar enough with that system. The coaches that I admire these days almost always come from this particular perspective. And it starts with self-regulation. You feel yourself beginning to shift into that place, and you have to regulate yourself out of it. And it requires a lot of self-awareness, and that's why mindfulness is so important in everything, including athletic performance.
So this notion of seeking truth, I think what I found really fascinating in doing the research, both on your book and just on your work, is this notion of emotional and psychological safety, right? Mm-hmm. And I think as athletes, and just in the athletic environment, we perceive safety often to just be a physical construct, right? A physical state of being, right? Not just the emotional and psychological component of that safety. And I know in reflecting on past experiences I've had as both a coach and as an athlete or student or somebody who is learning, there were moments where I did not feel emotionally or psychologically safe in order to seek that truth. So how can we create those states of safety where it's beyond just, I'm not going to punch or kick you, but I'm going to be here in this moment, right? I mean, what is that next step? Because we want to be seeking that truth, but we take for granted that.
I believe that it starts with, and is the core of this, is that psychological sense of self, that psychological sense of safety. I was talking to a strength and conditioning coach of a major league athletic team. And he told me something that I found fascinating. He said, when we're evaluating the prospects for the draft, he said, the ones that can jump the highest and have the most strength are generally not the best candidates. He said the best candidates were the ones that tested higher on Angela Duckworth's grit scale.
Interesting.
The best candidates were the candidates who could keep a hold of themselves psychologically in the clutch, which is exactly what happens when you see it in the most extreme situations like Navy SEAL training. This is exactly what the training is designed to do. Produce increasingly stressful situations where people are challenged to keep a hold of themselves in those particular positions psychologically. Now, how do you do it? Well, first of all, to be aware that if you're too hypo aroused, if you get too lost in shame or regret because you just screwed something up, or you get too hyper aroused, you're too pissed off about something, or you're too scared or something, at that point, you don't just lose performance, you lose your ability to think. So the ability to keep yourself regulated in that middle level where you're just functioning in the present moment, doing the best that you can, with an understanding of that's all I have to offer. I'm in the present moment doing the best I can. Of course, as a martial artist, I like to watch Ultimate Fighting. Because, anybody who's trained in much martial arts loves Ultimate Fighting. It's fascinating to me to see the athletes in the Ultimate Fighting, the best ones, they stay in that range all the way to the point of unconsciousness. In other words, they might be knocked out or they might be choked out, but they never lose as long as they're consciously aware, keeping themselves in that range, by keeping themselves regulated. Now, within the context of that, you anchor yourself in whatever your principles are, and superior athletes always are based in, I'm going to do the absolute best I can, and I know that there's a deeper level of coherence that I'm always looking for. Even as they win or lose, they're winning or losing while they're still in their mind continuing to try to solve the problem, because solving the problem is all they do. I was a tennis player for a long period of time. And I remember one coach saying, "There's just one match, Keith. That's it. You start playing tennis, and there's one match, and then you die or you stop playing tennis." Okay? And the people, the elite people that I admire in the field, that's how they play. Now that is a skill that can be cultivated. It's cultivated best in a relationship because everything's in a relationship. So every relationship is a culture. And so as a coach, I have the capacity to co-create a culture with someone where these values are at the core of this. And I can only do that authentically if I'm living it myself. Okay? So if I'm a coach and I'm losing it, my job is to go, sorry, you guys, I'm losing it. Okay. And now I got to get a hold of myself before I can be functional again. Why? Because everybody knows the quickest way to lose people that you're working with is to not be your authentic self. You have to, and to do that, you have to be able to walk the walk. You have to be able to practice these things, live these things, to be able to teach these things and co-create cultures. So one of it is regulating. Then there's all the practices that everybody teaches, all the mindfulness, the deep breathing, that kind of stuff. There's the focused practice pieces that we do. We chunk stuff up and we practice it. And that's what master coaching does. But we have to have somebody that is aware that they're ignited and aware of the fact that I want to keep getting better at what I do for the rest of my life. All the athletes that I admire, that's all they talk. You ask them about what they're doing, they say, well, I'm working on this. They don't say, well, I just won Wimbledon. Yeah, I'm working on my volleying now. Or LeBron, I'm working on my 3-point. You just won the championship. Yeah, I'm working on my 3-point shot. I'm working on my defense. That's just a mindset that we teach and we take and we live with the people we work with.
So when we define some of these emotions, when you in one of the videos that you have, you make this point that disgust is a both sophisticated emotion and can be one of the most detrimental to creating that sense of safety, right?
That's right.
And I would love for you to explain, what does disgust look like? And if we can frame it in the perspective of that athletic environment, that would be really powerful.
Okay, good. Now, and shame is another one. Shame and
Yeah.
disgust. Disgust doesn't show up in human beings until late in development. 4 or 5 years old. Shame doesn't show up in human beings until they're 11 or 12 months old. Okay. Why is that? Well, shame is a social emotion. You only experience it when you experience yourself being disapproved of by other people, and then later on when you can observe yourself by yourself. Disgust doesn't show up until you begin to discover that there's certain things in the world that are icky and certain things that are not icky. And how do you describe disgust? Well, just look at my face. Okay, that's a disgusted face. Okay, that's a universal emotion. You can go to any place in the world, show somebody something disgusting, and then they'll have that. And if someone has that face at you, you're going to feel a sense of profound disapproval, because and that disapproval will go into you, and it will register as distress. And then how you manage that is determined by what your training is. Often when we get that facing us, that disgust facing us, we'll go into a shame emotion. And shame emotions they're parasympathetic affect. Your nervous system, your autonomic nervous system has a sympathetic, get me jacked up, parasympathetic, get me down. The parasympathetic shame emotion causes you to lose energy, lose strength, look down. The weak, your muscles up here get weak. It's a disaster for an athlete to enter a shame state, because you lose your capacity to do anything. Okay. And that shame state only happens if your inner self has absorbed the disapproval and internalized it. Okay. In other words, part of the strength of competition is if you look at me at disgust because I just made a great shot, rather than feel shame, I need to feel a sense of compassion for you, my opponent. You're disgusted. Yeah, it looks like you're disgusted at me, but I know who you're really disgusted with. Okay. And the only way you learn that is by getting very, very sensitive to your own reactions. And also if you get disgusted with another person. Disgusted with another person can mobilize you, but it also separates you from that other person. That's difficult in competition, because when we're separated from our opponent, we're losing valuable information about our opponent.
Oh, what do you mean by that?
We have mirror neurons in our brains that recapitulate other people's states of consciousness, including their intentionality. These are incredibly sensitive. Like right now, as I talk, there's a part of you sub-vocalizing what I'm saying in your throat. Okay, and people that are listening, you're doing this, even though you're not aware of it. Yeah. If I have an opponent, either an opposing person or opposing team, if I'm disgusted with them, or if I'm angry with them, even, it cuts off my empathic resonance with them. I want that empathic resonance. Why? Because that gives me a window into their experience. That window into their experience gives me an edge. Okay? And in that edge, I need to understand that by defeating you, I'm making you stronger. Okay? And that's competing with joy. And yeah, you'll be disappointed, and you'll be pissed off, and you'll be disgusted, and all that other stuff. That's fine. But this is my gift to you. My gift to you is to understand you and to grow in these capacities. And so that's why these emotions are important, to identify them and to know where to go with them. Okay. I want to adjust from shame into presence. I want to adjust from disgust into engagement. And then I want to use that with the deeper purpose of whatever it is I'm doing, get lost in it. Get lost in that flow state.
Can you give an example of what it might look like to shift from disgust to engagement?
Well, give me a sport.
Let's take football.
Okay, good. Okay, so football is the closest that I know, besides rugby, to actual war. Okay, if you ever been with a high school football team coming back from a defeat, or more revealing, it's not like a basketball team coming back from a defeat. There's just more of a sense of we died. There's more of a sense of a lot on the line.
Yeah.
So I'm lining up against my opponent, and my opponent is trying to intimidate me. Yeah. I'm going to kick your ass. Maybe they're trash talking me. Maybe they gave me an extra bad hit, that kind of stuff. I'm focusing on that. I'm going, all right. there's a part of you that wants to destroy me, that is targeting me. And now there is a part of me inside that I'm finding, which is basically my warrior nature. Okay. Now this is where martial arts is really beautiful. Okay. Warrior nature is not I'm always going to win. Okay. Warrior nature is just I'm going to compete and either I will win or die. Okay. And you're at peace with that. And so I'm feeling that this person, so I'm disgusted with this person. He just cheated. He just clipped somebody. Go, okay. Yeah. Okay, I now know this person is capable of this. And so now reaching into him, I know he's going to go for that. And so now how do I contain him when he does that again? And how not only do I can contain him, how do I contain him and turn this to the advantage of my team? Because the willingness to cheat is also a vulnerability. Okay, now I'm interested. I'm involved. I want to understand his psychology so that I can defeat him. And partly I want to defeat him to win, and partly I want to defeat him because if he gets defeated enough doing that, maybe he'll change. Maybe he'll grow and not do that anymore. Okay? And also I want to do it to be able to, and I want to tell my teammates about what's going on. I want to give them more insight about what's going on with people. This guy's beginning to lose it. So this is how we're going to work on him. Okay. Why is that? Because this is how we make them stronger. Now, disgust is I see somebody collapse in a particular sense, or I see somebody cheat in a particular sense, or that kind of stuff. And I have to be cautious because that gives me a sense of moral superiority. Anytime you have a sense of moral superiority, you're at risk. You're not aware of your own vulnerability. And so I remind myself, I'm feeling morally superior and I need to engage this person and defeat them given my increased knowledge about them. And my disgust, again, shifts into a form of interest.
So one of the themes that has just popped up a couple times in a row, Keith, that is fascinating to me is the duality that you are holding right there at times, right? So where so often, especially in an athletic context, we are trained to focus on just the side that we can see and the side that we can focus on. As an example, right? Cheating, somebody taking a cheap shot, you're seeing the other side of it, or the side of us internally that says we are morally superior, we understand something better, making us also vulnerable and also needing to in turn heighten that arousal and focus so that we recognize it. How can we cultivate that sense of, I guess, both duality and the ability to hold both of those competing ideas at the same time? Because that's challenging.
Well, first of all, you can't regulate stuff that you can't be aware of. So that's why we practice mindfulness. Yeah. That's why everybody teaches it. That's why Phil started it with George. I forget his name. I met him at a
Mumford.
Mumford, yes. George Mumford and I hung out together a lot in Portugal. We presented at the same conference. What a guy! Why did Phil? Because he knew that gave people his athletes an edge. Because first you have to have compassionate self-observation. Okay, compassionate self-observation is not the same as critical self-observation. Critical self-observation just sends you into shame spirals. Oh, I just fucked up. God, what a worthless. Okay, I'm losing energy as I speak.
Yeah.
Compassionate self-observation is I just observe something happening, and there's an indicator for making an adjustment. If I did well, do better. If I did poorly, make an adjustment. So it starts with mindfulness. It starts with mindful awareness. Within the context of mindful awareness comes a sense of ruthless self exploration. These are my strengths. These are my weaknesses. Period. Okay. And now, given this is why coaching is so important. What does my master coach say to me about enhancing my strengths and addressing my weaknesses? Okay. I begin the growth mindset process of effort and progress, gradually improving in these areas, period. That's what I do. Okay? And if, Wawrinka, the famous tennis player who won several majors, he had tattooed on his arm, first you fail, then you go out and fail again. It had taken him he had been playing tennis probably for 25 years before he ever made it big. He just kept failing, but he kept training and training and training and training. And all of a sudden, he was winning a major. Okay. And I think this is one of the reasons why we're seeing way more way more majors being won by guys over their 30s. Because of modern conditioning and strength and technique and equipment, the actual skill levels are very, very, so it's the guys that have strengthened their spirit over time. So mindfulness practice, understanding what kind of psychological training you're doing in terms of what's my mindset and how am I going to improve it. What's my training regimen? How can I tweak it to give me a slight edge? What's my understanding of my opponent? How can I have a deeper understanding that will give me an edge over that opponent? This is an ongoing process that continues forever. And so understanding that as this is what organizes me in the world. And in the midst of that, I have to keep myself regulated in these areas, particularly, and I want to get better at it in the clutch, not worse.
Yeah. So you told this really in an interview I was listening to, you told this great, or maybe not even a story, just an example, right, of the difference between in a escalating conflict, right, how there might be I don't know what the word is, but our default mechanism when we feel that conflict may be to revert to either a bully archetype or a victim archetype, where we may pull back and accept, we may decide to dominate and get the way that we want.
Right.
Was so fascinating to me as I listened to that is, how do you walk that line as an athlete or just as somebody who is part of a team of being growth minded and growth oriented so that you're able to be coachable and take feedback when it comes in your way, but not immediately step into the role of the victim? And the reason this popped into my head was because I can remember very specifically interactions with coaches in high school and in college where, not even to their own fault, but just because it was the pattern that I had developed, my being coachable turned into becoming the victim, right? And not being able to hold those at least interpersonal boundaries there. Yes. How can we better navigate that?
This is a human reaction. Yeah. The human reaction is when someone is trying to dominate me in some fashion, I go into fight-flight mode. And if I can feel helpless in some fashion, if I can feel powerless, I'll go into a victim mode. And we're programmed to do this. I mean, this goes back to hunter-gatherer groups. Why is that? If two guys started raising their intensity and one guy didn't give in, then the tribe would lose one or two valuable members. So we're programmed to raise intensity, and somebody gives in, somebody dominates. And it feels good to dominate, it feels bad to give in. Okay. And so this particular dynamic can be exploited in competition and can be exploited by other people. So first of all, it really runs just like anything else off the coach. Yeah. Just if you want to affect an organization and you don't have the top person on board, forget about it. So either the coach has an understanding of this whole organization is about winning and developing every single person in this organization as best we can. If they have that organization, okay, now we can get everybody else in line around that. If the coach doesn't, then we have problems. Okay. So rather than, so I could suggest strategies for managing up, like a coach of bullies, for instance. Okay. Well, there's things you have to do. You literally have to become more mature than your coach. And that's really hard. Okay. Or now, let's say you do have a coach that knows what he's doing. Okay, let's assume that. Okay, then it becomes about being aware of yourself and then being aware about how you make the adjustment. I remember seeing Dennis Rodman running back after Jordan just made a basket. He ran next to some guy. The referee was on the other side, and Dennis Rodman punched the guy in his ribs. Okay, and the guy just was furious. Okay, now at that particular point, Dennis Rodman did this all the time. He disrupted other people because they would feel like a victim. They feel like he just got away with something. Yeah. Now with the people that it didn't get away with, is they go, okay, I just got Dennis Rodman. Okay, so what am I going to do? I'm gonna make sure to block him out on the defensive boards because he was the rebounding champ, right? I'm gonna take his rebounds away. Okay, that's what I'm gonna do. That's gonna feel really good. He just punched me. You know what? I'm gonna block him out and take his rebounds away. Those guys did well. Okay, why? They went, how can I get stronger as a result of the situation? Not how can I be victimized? Ref, this guy's whatever. Okay, it's always that shift. One of my favorite texts of all times is a book of 5 Rings by Miyamoto Musashi, the preeminent samurai warrior in 17th century Japan. Now, 17th century Japan, best sword fencers in the world. This guy had 60 engagements and didn't lose. He had something everybody else didn't have, wrote a book about it. And one thing he said is, he said, whenever you take a long sword in your hand, you think always of the cutting. He said, you learn all the sword attitudes, you learn all the systems, but the bottom line, every time you take a long sword in your hand, you think always of the cutting. So whenever anything happens, when I get pissed, when I get ashamed, when I get disgusted, when I get whatever, how can I turn this into more success right now? How can I think of the cutting? How can I turn this into being more effective at this moment? Not tomorrow, not in 2 weeks, at this moment. There's a guy in the Boston Bruins. He goes up to his opponents and licks them. Okay? Well, that really bothered a lot of guys. Okay, threw them off their game. Their actual team meetings. What the fuck are we going to do? This guy's licking us. Well, when you get licked, what are you going to do to make you more effective in that moment? That's the question. How can I use this to make me more effective? If that's organized from the coach down into everybody, into the strength and conditioning people, into the psychology people, into the diet people, into the sleep people, into the travel people, into the relationships. If a person's having a hard time in this relationship, get them help. Why? Because we're all connected. If you're having problems in your relationship, it's going to affect you. It's going to affect you elsewhere. And so support families, support couples, support all that stuff, because it's all part of the same system.
So this is going to be a little bit of a left turn, but not too much. The question I'm curious about, how do you see the relationship between love and grit?
Duckworth, I love Angela Duckworth. I encourage anybody who wants to read, to understand grit, read her book. Grit is the combination of passion and persistence. Okay. Now, that sounds easy, but it's really not easy. It's actually quite difficult because we get distracted so easily. And so, how do we find our way through that? As I said earlier, love is about being at one with. When we're ignited into some passion that we're pursuing, we want to be at one with whatever that is. If it's a sport, I want to be at one with it. I've studied a fair amount of things in my life. I've been quite active. And, when I was a surfer, okay, I wanted to be at one with surfing. And really hard. Surfing, actually, the hardest thing I ever studied was ballet.
Yeah.
Ballet was almost fucking impossible. How do you study ballet? Okay, being at one with. Okay, when you have that experience, the subjective experience is love. It's an experience of love. I am at one with this moment. And when you talk to people in their area, and it doesn't matter how violent it is, they use terms that reflect love. You talk to ultimate fighters. Why do they love each other at the end of a match after literally trying to kill each other? Because throughout that whole thing, they were one with a particular warrior archetype, and the only way they could do that was in the face of another person doing the same thing. This is my opportunity to be at one with that pure warrior spirit. This is my opportunity to be at one with football. I can't be at one with football if I don't have an opponent. I can't be at one with tennis unless there's someone who challenges me. That's necessary to find that warrior self, to find that deep sense of unity, that deep sense of love of that process in that engagement. And I have to risk losing. I have to risk being injured. I have to risk all those things. But as I risk those things and I surrender to it, I have those moments of transcendence, and those are moments of love. Pure sense of unity. Okay? And unity with everything is the ultimate, is love with a capital L. And if you talk to people who do a lot of contemplative stuff, as I do and a lot of my friends do, ultimately your contemplative practice leads you with a sense of unity with everything. That's just being the one love that is everything. And that sounds a little crazy, but if you've had that experience, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you've had that experience on the playing field or in the ring or wherever else you do it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's what makes it all worth it. Okay? That's objective experience. And that's pure love. That's experience.
It seems to me that sometimes love gets I don't want to say a bad rep, but I think a misunderstood rep through the context of sport, right? And through the context of athletic performance, right? We're still even today very in the culture of sport, especially as you climb up in the level of competition, love becomes less and less and less maybe talked about in the way that we just shared right there, right? It becomes perceived as a feminine emotion, right? An emotion that may lead us potentially to weakness. And so, what can we do to bring that definition of love that we just talked about, that is being one with, that is being able to step into this moment? It doesn't mean that I'm bringing less of myself to it. In fact, it means I'm bringing more of myself to this moment. How can we bring that into the culture that we're building in our locker rooms and within our teams?
Once again, I think it comes from the top. Mm-hmm. And part of it is driven by mindful awareness. Okay. Part of it is just driven by the fact that we have a lot of research now that wasn't available to previous generations. There's a reason that in the Warriors locker room, one of their 3 principles is joy. Okay, well, if joy makes you wimpy, the Warriors form of wimpiness is something that we all want more of. Okay?
Not too shabby.
Yeah, not too shabby. When I was being coached back in the 60s, no, this would not have gone over. But the research since then has shown that if the deeper consciousness in an athlete produces superior performance and more longevity in their career. Okay. All right. So that's how, how does George sell it to NBA athletes? George Mumford. This gives you an edge. Okay. You want to have an edge, do this. It gives you an edge. Then if you got the coach on board, then you have now Michael Jordan on board. Michael Jordan says, or Kobe says, this gives you an edge, do it. Now you have the leaders on your team, and then you have your coach. The person who made this popular in tennis was Andre Agassi. His career had crashed. He got together with Brad Gilbert. He started meditating. He started learning how to soothe himself between points. You could see him do it. He was drawing from a Zen practice of doing deep breathing and centering into the present moment. And he started winning majors at an old age. And all the other people on the tour said, what's Andre doing that we're not doing? Okay, it was this. It was establishing unity with the practice, independent of everything else. And so you're seeing more Agassiz these days and less, young McEnroes. And even McEnroe, when he plays these days, doesn't play like he used to play. He's very focused on the court. If you ever watch him play as a senior, he doesn't throw tantrums anymore, as far as I can tell.
So before I get to my final couple questions here, Keith, and this is, there's so many things bubbling to the surface right now. What energizes me the most about our conversation and in doing the research for your interview is just there is a depth of emotional understanding and spiritual understanding that it may not even be that we take it for granted. We just are still learning so much about, yet there is so much wisdom to be shared there, right? And as athletes that are open to that step, as coaches that are open to that step, there are so many dimensions of our experience that affect our physical performance reality. And that's what we're talking about right now. So it's incredible to me. And one of the principles you brought up in an interview that I thought was super energizing is this notion of if we don't embrace truth, we are manipulatable. And this was brought up in the context of just politics, but it seemed so relevant to sport as well. So when you think of that phrase, what comes to mind, and can you map that to those interpersonal relationships we've been talking about?
We all see different universes. We all live in a different universe. And our universe is determined to a certain extent by our worldview. And as we develop, our worldviews change. Little kids just identify with, their own self, and then their mom, and then to their family, and then to their school. Later on, they start identifying with their country. And then later on, maybe with all humanity. in other words, there's an expansion. Development involves an expansion.
Mm.
It's like that on almost every developmental line. Now, how do we translate, that developmental process into competition? Partly, we become ruthless in the way that we self-examine. For instance, we can examine ourselves as an object. I can see objectively how fast I run, how much I can lift. Okay, we can examine ourselves as a subject. How focused did I feel, which is unqualifiable. How focused did I feel when it was that the last 30 seconds and I really needed to focus. How focused did I feel, or how distracted was? We can orient ourselves intersubjectively. I can ask the person that I'm with, how well did I help you? How well did we do with this thing on the team? We can organize ourselves objectively as a group. We can observe our group and see how our group is doing. All these validity standards, we can observe ourselves, and they're going to give us information about whether we're doing better or worse. Now, if we have a ruthless commitment to what is, this thing makes me more healthy. This thing makes me less healthy. This thing makes me stronger. This thing makes me weaker. If I have that ruthless commitment to what is, and I'm available to receive influence from people who want to help, then my life becomes a constant series of adjustments towards deeper truth. And in sport, deeper truth translates into success. It translates into achievement. Okay? There's an understanding that I never have the deepest truth. And that new truths always come. That my current understanding is just my best understanding. Okay, all right, that's fine. But that doesn't mean that my current understanding isn't true. It just means that I'm committed to the best understanding. If you show me a better way of being, I'll adopt that. Okay? This is actually very difficult. People who identify with their skill set mostly will unconsciously resist input that will make them better. Mostly because input that makes them better initially disrupts their old pattern, and their performance goes down slightly. These people are at a distinct disadvantage. The people, when they get the input, have a sense this will make me better, allow themselves to be disrupted, and then to reform at a higher level of complexity. Now, that has to be taught, and then it has to be embodied. And it's very, very difficult because most of us, when we train, we're trained in environments where they say, this is the way to do it, and just do it. When I was a Shotokan karate guy, in Shotokan karate, we always kept our hands low because we didn't do high kicks in Shotokan karate. Okay, well, I moved on and started fighting with Taekwondo people. They kept kicking me in the head. Well, why am I getting kicked in the head? Because I had to change how I managed my hands in combat. And so it was awkward at first, but then, I continued training. And then after a while, somebody tried to kick me in the head. They couldn't kick me in the head because I blocked I allowed myself to be disorganized so I could get reorganized. Now, understanding that and having a coach you trust keeps you on that mastery cycle. Okay. But understanding that there's going to be a stage where we have an inherent resistance to giving up what has worked before. And that's a natural developmental stage. You don't skip developmental levels. You have to go through them. And that's a developmental level between blind obedience and rational, I accept everything. That intermediate stage is where a lot of athletes are. And to achieve excellence, they need to grow through that stage into, is that going to make me better? I'll let myself get disorganized and reorganized. I'll do that. And not only will I do it, after a while, I'll enjoy that process. It won't be disturbing even, it'll be pleasurable. I used to bother me when I found a system that disrupted me. I have to learn a new system. I have to reorganize my whole understanding of psychotherapy because I found this great new system I had to learn. After a while, I learned a new system and I went, God, how exciting. Now I get to reorganize my understanding of how everything works. I had gone into that new stage, and that's how I knew that I was in that new stage. I didn't feel distressed anymore. I felt pleasure. And this is where we want to guide our athletes. We want to guide them to that point where it's pleasurable for them to be disrupted rather than painful. And we can teach them that.
Wow. This has been incredible, Keith. Before we go to our final question, where can these guys go to connect with you online?
You can connect with me through drkeithwitt.com. You can read my books. My new book, Loving Completely, a 5-star practice for creating great relationships, will be out on Amazon. It'll be available on September 10th. That's our launch date. My last book, Shadow Light, Illuminations at the Edge of Darkness, deals an awful lot with these unconscious processes and how to maximize them in a wide variety of human endeavors, love, parenting, sex, relationships, competition, all that kind of stuff. I have a podcast I do every month with Integral Life called Live with Dr. Keith. And my friend Jeff Salzman and I have a show called The Shrink and the Pundit. He's the pundit and I'm the shrink. And we talk about a wide variety of topics. So you can find me on any of those places. Go to drkeithwitt.com. You'll find all of them. Come to my website. There's a lot of free stuff there. Join up for free. You get one of my books, The Attuned Family, for free. The subtext of that was one of my favorites: how to be a great partner to a great lover to your spouse and a great parent to your kids. I wanted to teach parents with young kids, you can be great lovers with your partner and you can be a great parent to your kid. I wanted to have people have an opportunity to do that. So that's where you can get my stuff. I encourage people to go there and benefit from it. Listen to the lectures and take what you can and make it your own.
Yeah. Thanks, Keith. Yeah, absolutely. So our final question, Keith, this show is called The Omni Athlete because we are fascinated and want to understand what it takes to be a mind, body, and spirit competitor. So the last question of the show is, what does it mean to you to be an Omni Athlete?
My life really was altered by martial arts. I'm a contemplative. I've been doing contemplative work for 50 plus years now. But I came to it through Shotokan Karate, where we did Zen meditation before and after each practice. And when I was 30 years old, I was studying with a Taoist priest and a Kung Fu master. I was studying healing with him and also weapons and fighting. And he gave me the Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi. And I finally understood it's the way of the warrior. One thing that Musashi used to say, said in the book, he said, you strike from the void. And in the end of his last book, the Book of the Void, he said, in the void is virtue and no evil. Wisdom has existence. Principle has existence. The way has existence. Spirit is nothingness. And so for me, I have to surrender and be the way. I have to allow the void to come through me into the world. And if I'm competing, it's the void coming through me into the competition. I become that. And that's the essence of the warrior spirit, which I find incredibly beautiful. It just breaks my heart. It's so beautiful. My opponent is there to help me discover and hone my warrior spirit. And I love my opponent for doing that. And my failures are challenges for me to grow. And my victories are challenges for me to not become grandiose. Because the warrior spirit is independent around all that stuff. And to me, that extends into every aspect of my existence, including my work as a psychotherapist and a teacher and a writer. It's allowing that and always knowing it's never quite right. It's never quite perfect. It's never coming through in the best way, but I'm just trying to have it come through better in the world and surrender to that. And if you do that, then in your last breath, I anticipate, because if my last breath happened after this interview, there'd be part of me that would go, I have no regrets. I've surrendered. I've surrendered to something that's larger than me, that serves the world, because I know from my own experience, the more people that engage in this fashion, this thing is value added to the world. Warriors do not create war. Okay? Warriors prevent war. Warriors don't diminish their opponents. Warriors make their opponents better. Okay? Warriors don't have hard relationships. Their relationships get better, and they support the development of the other people in their lives. And that's what we all want to do. And that's not something that's just me. That's something that's larger than me, that's coming through me into the world. And when people get that, they change. they become bigger and wiser and more beautiful.
Wow. Thank you, Keith. Thank you for being on the show, guys. Oh my gosh. Go dive deep into Keith's world. There are so many pieces of information, content, his books, everything he shares maps so beautifully to what we talk about through the athletic experience, but specifically what he shares on relationships and how we relate to the world around us and the people around us in our lives. If there is an area of the athletic environment that we yet don't focus enough on, it's that dynamic. It's the relationships and how that improves performance. Just flat out, it does. And as you go into Keith's world, you're going to see that. Like, the more that we are able to show up fully and as ourselves, as the human beings and the beautiful human beings that we are, just as Keith lays out in multiple fashions, the way we can deal with our shadow, the way that we can understand and not even hide from who we are, that affects how we show up on the athletic field. That affects how we show up for the people around us, our teammates, our coaches, everybody. So guys, go subscribe, connect with Keith, dive into his world, get his books, and just grab as much of the relationship knowledge and just interpersonal, integral consciousness knowledge that you can from Keith. And until next time, thank you for watching this episode of Omni Athlete. Hey, what is up, guys? Thank you for watching another episode of Omni Athlete. Please go like and subscribe to our podcast. That is our goal right now, is just to build this community as big as we possibly can, and we need your help to do it. So like and subscribe, share our content, guys. If this content adds any value to your world, that helps you perform, connect, go deeper, go wider, whatever it is that it does for you, if it provides value, all we ask is that you share our content and help grow this community. We can't accomplish our goal of elevating global consciousness through sport without you. You are an integral part of this mission and this purpose, and we need your help. So please go like, subscribe, and share our content, and continue to help us build and grow this community that is truly motivated to not just elevate consciousness, but elevate and shift the very culture of sport, so that we can truly experience the athletic experience in a brand new and energizing way for so many people, guys. So thank you, and please like and subscribe. Until next time.